Hello and welcome. In this lecture video, we're going to be talking about how to calculate break-even with multiple products. So there's two different approaches that we can take when we have multiple products, which is most companies, right? We could do a weighted average approach, or we could look at a situation where we have very different products. And so in that case, we're just going to look at the CM ratio. Okay? So if we have a situation where a company makes similar products. So for example, they have different flavors of ice cream, or they have 5 different types of bikes, or even 4 different types of bikes. What we can do is we can calculate a weighted average contribution margin. Or what we could do is we could say, if we think about Mary Washington, for example, what if we have in-state students and then we have out-of-state students? We can calculate a weighted average contribution margin between in-state and out-of-state students to help us figure out what needs to be our total enrollment, and then how many in-state do we have to enroll and out-of-state do we have to enroll in order to break even. Okay? So if you look at this example, let's look at an example. So we have our master pen company produces 2 types of pens. A Model A pen sells for $30, requires $15 of variable cost. So that means the contribution margin is 30 minus 15, so it's 15. Model B sells for $50, requires $20 of variable cost per unit. So you can see the CM per unit for Model B is going to be 30, the 50 minus the 20. Now, the one thing that we need to know in order to do a weighted average contribution margin approach, which again we would be using if we have very similar products and we can estimate the sales mix. Okay, we can figure out, we have to know what the sales mix is. So we have to know how many Model A's do we sell and Model B's do we sell. And that's what we're saying here. Suppose that Master Pen sells 2 Model A's for every Model B. This is our sales mix. And we have to know that in order to calculate the weighted average contribution margin per unit. So for example, if we were Mary Washington, we could say we enroll 2 in-state students for every out-of-state student. That would be our sales mix. Okay? Calculate the weighted average contribution margin per unit, and then the break even in units in total, and then for each product, assume that fixed costs are $100,000. So let's look at the next page where we have a little bit more room to solve this problem. So I'm going to say CM Model A equals 15, which I just showed you how to calculate, 30 minus the 15, and then CM B equals our 30. So then what we're going to do is we're going to calculate our weighted average, WA, weighted average, CM per unit by taking our 2 times the 15 plus our 1 times the 30 divided by 3. So what I did is I multiplied the contribution margin per unit by the sales mix. Remember, we sell 2 Model A's for every 1 Model B. So 2 Model A's, 1 Model B, and then I divide it by the total, which is 3, $20 per unit. Okay? Then I can calculate break even just like I did. BE, break even, I take my fixed costs, $100,000, which is given to us, divided by my weighted average contribution margin per unit, 5,000 pence. Okay? To sell 5,000 pence. Now the question becomes is how many of these 5,000 pens are Model A and how many are Model B? So I can say Model A. What I can do to solve that is I can multiply it times the sales mix. So I sell 2 of every 3 pens, right? 2/3 are Model A. 1 of every 3 is Model B. So I'm going to multiply it times 2/3. And then over here with model B, 5,000 times the 1/3. And that's how many pens I would have to have for model B. Okay? So let's look at a situation though where we have very different products. This, what we did, is a situation where we don't have a whole lot of different products. Maybe we sell 5 different types of products. And the other thing about this is that we can't sell too many, because if we sell too many different products, we can't estimate the sales mix. In this case, we only sold 2 pens. And then we can, because we didn't sell that many different products, we can estimate the sales mix. Same thing with Mary Washington. We have in-state students, we have out-of-state students. But if we start to price students by state that they're coming from, or by country and state that they come from, it might be really hard to estimate the sales mix because we have so many different locations. So we can't really estimate the sales mix in that situation. Same thing with Walmart, for example. Walmart, think about how many different products Walmart sells. They can't go through and say, well, for every roll of toilet paper that we sell, we also sell 5 toothbrushes. Okay, they can't really go through and estimate that kind of a sales mix. It's very difficult. So because they have so many different products, they have so many different contribution margins, it makes it almost impossible for them to estimate the sales mix. So we can't break it out and say, well, we're going to sell 5 rolls in order to break even for a Walmart store. We have to sell 10 rolls of toilet paper, 5 toothbrushes, and 50 humidifiers. We can't go through and break it out that way because we can't estimate the sales mix at that level of detail. Okay, so what we need to do is estimate. We need to talk about break even, not in terms of units, but only in terms of sales dollars. Okay, total sales dollars. All right. So in order to solve this type of a problem where we're dealing with very different products, okay, very different products, that company that sells a lot of different products and they can't estimate the sales mix, what we'll do is take a different approach and use the CM ratio. Remember, that is contribution margin divided by sales. That's how we calculate the CM ratio. So when we return back to our RBC bicycle example over here, we had our sales, and we have bicycles, and then we also sell carts. Okay, we have 500 right over here, and then we have our carts. That gives us our total, and we have our total variable expenses, our total contribution margin, and then our total fixed expenses, and then we have our total net operating income over here. So what we're going to do, in order to do this, we're going to calculate the break-even point in terms of sales dollars, and we'll use our CM ratio. So the way I can calculate my CM ratio is I can say CM divided by sales, and I'll do it in terms of total. 265 divided by my 550, 0.482, or 48.2%, or what I can also, I'll write that more clearly, 48.2%, I can also infer this as saying that I get about 48 cents of contribution margin for every dollar of sales. So then we can use our formula that we talked about in a prior lecture video for calculating break even in terms of sales dollars, which was fixed expenses plus profits divided by our CM ratio. Now I'm asking for break even, so profits will be 0. So it just becomes fixed expenses divided by the CM ratio. So my fixed expenses, 170 divided by 0.482 gives me $352,000. $830. That's my break even in terms of sales dollars. Okay. So what I want you to do is I want you to do this problem. On page 193, I want you to pause the lecture video, do this problem, and then let's come back and take a look and see how you would have solved it. Okay. Okay, so let's see how you did. So this is the way I solved the problem. Is I came over here and I said, okay, our sales are 550,000, increase at 10%. That means it's an increase in sales dollars of $55,000. Then what I did is I used my CM ratio and I said, of that $55,000, I get about 48 cents in contribution margin. So this is my CM ratio, which we calculated on the other page right over here. So that means my increase in CM is equal to my $26,510. That's my increase in CM, my additional contribution margin that I get from additional sales dollars of $55,000. Okay. Now, what's the impact on profit? Well, I'm beyond the break even here because this is greater than zero. So I know that any contribution margin beyond the break even is also equal to my increase in net operating income. So this would be my increase in net operating income. Okay. So we also have to talk about some assumptions over here with cost volume profit analysis. The first one is that we can easily separate out our costs into variable and fixed components. Okay. We have to be able to do that because if we can't do that, we can't estimate the cost because we know variable cost behavior and we know fixed cost behavior. That's why we had to take those mixed costs that we did in some prior lecture videos and separate the mixed costs into fixed and variable components. We also have to assume that variable costs per unit are constant, that we're within the relevant range, that fixed costs are also constant, that we can estimate the sales mix when we have the multi-product break even, and that we can estimate the sales mix, and that it remains constant. Okay? Those are some of those assumptions that we really need to focus on right over here. I'm going to star those. Okay? So I'm going to end this lecture video now. And the next lecture video, which will be your final lecture video, has you going over some additional practice problems. Okay? Thank you.